Hi, and welcome to CAD-Prof.com. This is lesson 10 of a 10-part CAD for Landscape series. I will open the PDF file that comes with the lesson and rotate it in place. And you can see that we've created a new layer called Hatch. The color we've selected is color number 9. It is the last color along the primary color chips. It's very light, so it doesn't interfere or overpower the rest of the drawing. I've also included some details in order to help us to draw the brackets that will hold the fence to the posts. The two brackets are identical, but in order to position the second one, we need to draw the lower one first, create a couple of construction lines to give us an intersection point that allow us to copy and paste the lower bracket into the upper position as well. I'll close that file off and open up AutoCAD. And we'll begin by going into L1 of lesson number 9 from the other day. File open. I will locate lesson 9. There's L1. Let me just lower the bottom of the CAD program. And we're ready to begin. Okay, so I'm going to go into model space and see what I've drawn. We still have a couple of dimensions to add to the cap. I'm going to click on the dimension and then click on Make Current, and it'll automatically select that. I'll also make sure that the annotation is identifying DIM 24, and it is. So I'm going to add the final dimensions. If you take a look at 1L2, it shows that there is a linear dimension at the top of this cap. And some of the things we're going to do today is a bit of a review, but it'll help us work through the problem together so that there's no missing pieces. This 4 I want to make sure kind of fits into a space where it doesn't interfere with the drawing. So while I was dimensioning, I clicked and held the wheel down so I can place that. And then I will select Dimension Continue and click on the next 2 points as well. And then press Enter. So at this point I have all the dimensions necessary. I'm going to create the layer Hatch. Click on the layer properties. Click on the new layer icon. Type in the word Hatch. Click on the color chip. And on the PDF file, it shows it being the index color number 9. It's the last one along these primary colors. And we'll select OK and close this menu down. Now I'm going to place Hatch as the current layer, and I will be ready to hatch this particular object here. We have a number of different hatch symbols we're going to be using. I'm going to click on the hatch icon, and in here we have a number of different ribbon options. The first one is to select where the pattern is going to go. If I pick a point, the point must be fully enclosed. Now it's automatically picking the hatch pattern that's selected in the window. I want to pick a different hatch pattern. So I have the upper arrow, the lower arrow, that scrolls through the patterns one row at a time, or the bottom arrow, which opens the entire panel. Now I've extended this panel just by clicking and dragging the 3 little dots that are at the bottom of the menu palette. And I want to select Arc Concrete, and you can see it automatically changes it. Now the triangles represent the aggregate of the concrete and the dots represent the sand mixture. If I want to reposition this to get more aggregate symbols, I will go into where it says Set Origin, and I can click anywhere inside of it and move that pattern so that it better symbolizes what I want. This isn't too bad right here. So I'm going to leave that as it is, and I will roll my mouse to move outwards. And now I'm going to apply hatch patterns to this stonework. You can see it's automatically trying to pick different areas of where I can add more hatch. Now the cap is concrete, so is the foundation. So rather than do the stonework, I'm going to go right to the foundation. And I will then click on different areas of the foundation. Yeah, that's a good symbol area, and this is a good area. Notice how it's ignoring the actual rebars in here as well. I'm going to click inside here. Because the rebars are self-contained, they have a continuous outer edge. And that's why the pattern isn't going inside that edge, even though it's a hidden line type. Now once I clicked on the footing, I press Enter to stop the selection. Now we can always extend that selection. Notice I've got it above the grade and below the grade. I can add to that selection if I want. If I click inside the hatch pattern, I get these nodes, and those nodes are fully adjustable. So I'm going to click on the middle node, which will allow me to stretch it down into the lower portion of the grade. So how does hatch work? When we click on pick point, it actually creates a boundary edge based on enclosed spaces. So this was an enclosed space, this was enclosed, and this was, because it had the lines that ran right through it. So that's how it selects the different hatch areas. And you can see as I've clicked on that, it's identified these rebars as fully enclosed. And that's why it works so well. Now I'm going to hatch the stonework here. I'm going to use a different symbol. This one's a bit more complicated because I want to hatch everything but not hatch the actual mortar joints. So I'll go back into the hatch pattern and I'll expand the menu. And this we're going to use a 45-degree angle hatch, so this ANSI 31. Now there's different notations based on trade. I'm going to select the ANSI 31 because if the 45-degree angle slope line is the pattern that we used for bricks, if I click on the first one, you'll notice that the actual pattern is very dense. This is where we can go in and adjust the pattern properties. So right now it's set to 1. What I suggest always is go half lower or half higher on every single pattern to identify what it should be. So I've gone from 1 to 2, then I'll go to 4, and I will go to 8. And I just click on the actual window and then change the number. So the next one will be 16. So how do we actually determine the number? Typically, the number is either 1, a half of 1, or the drawing scale. If we take a look at this particular image in L3, you'll notice how dense that pattern is. The drawing scale here is 3 inch equals 1 foot, or 1 to 4. If I select 4 in this window, it's too dense. So I'm going to select a multiple of 4, and 16 seems to work very well for this particular application. There's a bit of a guessing game when it comes to hatch patterns because each pattern is designed for different trades. So now that I've got a pattern, I'm going to continue to click in all the different locations. I'm ignoring the ones that have the text information only because it will interfere with the text. Now there are instances where it will not interfere with the text, and I'm going to show you the one down here where it applies. So I've now hatched all of the brickwork. And now I want to hatch a grade symbol along the base of this. Look at 1L2. You'll notice that it's an unusual shape and it's not something that's enclosed. Now in order to do this, I've got a couple things I need to do. I'm going to use one of the other commands that we have. It's to draw a spline. And this requires some experimentation, but we'll just try it out. I'm going to draw using the very first spline fit curve. And all I'm going to do is create this curved shape around the footing, and then press enter. Now I can hatch inside of this shape. Remember, hatching requires us to have a fully enclosed shape. So that's why I've started past the grade line and then I ended past the grade line, and I want to hatch in here with the earth pattern. I'm going to click on hatch, expand the menu, and in this menu you'll see it's called earth. So I click on earth, and then I'm going to click inside of this pattern. And if all went well, it should neatly fill that pattern. And then I can press enter. You'll notice that it picked up the scale of 16 as well. And that worked with this particular application. The other thing you should notice is this. After you've hatched, click on the hatch. It creates boundary edges around all of the numbers. This is why the order that we draw is very important. We dimension our objects first and then hatch. Hatch is always the last thing that we do to an object. I'll press escape first, and then I'm going to click on the spline and delete it because I don't want to see it. This is the pattern that I want to end up with. Great. So now I want to preview my drawing. I'm going to click on L2. And I can see the hatch pattern that I've created. Let's preview this. I'm going to click on File and Plot. Plot's about halfway down the page. And for my printer plotter, select the Adobe PDF option. If you do not have Adobe PDF installed, this does not show up. You have another option that you can select instead, which is AutoCAD PDF General Documentation. And that has a slight variation to what I've selected here in Adobe PDF. I'll show you both just so you can see the difference. In this menu, I want to select paper size letter. It already identified that my paper is 8.5 by 11. What do I want to plot? I want to actually only plot the layout. Layout refers to the tabs, so I don't have to select an area to plot. I will make sure that it is at a 1:1 scale. If you've got fit to paper selected, simply change the scale 1:1. Why is it 1:1? Because the page is 8.5 by 11 and I'm plotting onto an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. For plot style table, we're going to pick nothing right now. Don't worry about any of these other options for now. Just make sure that they're checked off exactly the way I've shown, and it shows that I've checked off landscape. Now click on preview. When I click on preview, this is what I'm going to see for my object. And this window allows you to zoom in and out. And what I wanted to point out was this. Notice how the hatch, it's actually gone over top of some of the line work. And that's not acceptable. So press escape. Select cancel from the print menu. Why has this happened? There's a thing called drawing order, and it depends on how you've actually drawn your model. Remember, I mentioned that hatches are done last because they will then accompany all your dimensions and your line work. Unfortunately, by doing so, it interferes or goes on top of the line work. That's referred to as drawing order. So what I need to do is this. I need to change the drawing order of all my hatches. So click on all the hatching that you've done. And now right click on any one of these nodes. And you notice the word draw order. We want to send all of this right to the back. Now you may not have noticed really anything on your screen, but when I go to plot this out now, I will see a big difference. File plot. I will change this time to the CAD PDF general file. And display. Why has this menu changed? Because I'm not in my tab. I'm actually in model space. This is a different way of plotting. So instead of selecting what to plot as a display, we're going to select window. And this time, we're going to zoom a window out to see what we've plotted. Notice all of this has changed too. Well, what I want to do is rotate it. I want a portrait view. That changes the direction of the area we're viewing. I want it to fit the paper this time instead of a 1:1. I want to center the plot. These are all options that allow me to view the window, not the paper. Select preview. Now let's see what we've done here. The line work is nice and clean because all of my hatching has now gone behind the line work that I have. This is what we want from our final result. So let's close this preview window. Cancel this print. Let's go back to L2. We'll do the same process, only now it's on the page. File, plot. Instead of the Adobe, I will once again go to the CAD PDF. It's now set to layout because we want to plot the layout tabs. It's already set to 1:1 because it is an 8.5 by 11 page that I'm plotting onto, and it's an 8.5 by 11 paper space page that I'm plotting from. And let's do a preview here. And it's great. It's exactly what we want to see with our drawing. Now you may notice that the outer edges are slightly offset, so we can correct that. Go up to the upper left-hand corner and click on the X in the preview window. We're going to make the adjustments in the print window here. For instance, mine's at about a 1/2 inch. I'm going to type in 0.25 and 0.25. Now I'm using 0.25 in each case to see which direction that changes in. Click on preview, and look, it's nicely fit within my page. So I know if I use the AutoCAD PDF, I must adjust the X and Y position by 0.25. If I use the Adobe Acrobat one, then I don't need to do so. Great, this is what we want. I'm going to cancel this, and I'll save my file. File, save as. And this will be in my Lesson 10 folder this time as my L1 drawing, and we're ready to move on to the next steps. I want to complete the 2 metal brackets that hold the fence in place. So I'm going to switch to the fence layer. I'm going to go into model space because that's where I should be drawing, not in paper space. And I'm going to draw the lower bracket first. So I can draw two lines. You don't have to be accurate with its length. You just need to know that it has to be at least 2.5 inches long. I got a 4-inch line in this direction. I'll draw another one in this direction. And then I'll use my offset to create all the different dimensions that I require. This is a 1/4-inch plate, so 0.25. And I'll offset that in this direction, offset that in this direction. The plate itself measures 2.5 inches. So I'll select offset again, 2.5. And I'll use the top line down and the side line to the right. And I have everything that I need to trim this. So I'm going to pick everything with a crossing, and then I can trim this using the different techniques we had discovered as we were working with the program. And I could do it this way. There's another technique I could use, and that's using a fillet with a 0 distance radius. So I'm going to select fillet, and for a radius R enter, I'm going to use 0. You'll see what's going to happen. It's going to fillet those lines nice and neat and create a radius of 0, which is basically a square edge. And by doing this in this manner, I can trim and finish off the piece very, very quickly. So now that I've got this in place, I'm ready to draw the bolt. I will offset the measurement that's shown there at 1 1/8. That's 1.125. The top line down. Now that bolt shows that it extends 4 inches into the actual foundation wall, so I'll offset by 4, this line in. And that bolt itself is a 1/2 inch thick, so I'll offset by 0.5, the line down. And then I can extend to the line, or again, I have my fillet set at 0. I could fillet that line to this edge, and this line to this edge. And there is my bolt. I'm ready to draw the bolt head, but in order to draw the profile correctly, I actually need to draw the front face of the bolt itself. So I'm going to use the rectangle command. If I click on the arrow to the right of it, I have the polygon command. Polygons allow me to draw multiple sides. So it's asking me how many sides I want. I'm going to type in 8. It's going to ask me for the center of the polygon. I'm going to click anywhere on my screen because I'll move it afterwards. Now it's asking me what do I want to do. Do I want to inscribe a circle or circumscribe it? Circumscribe gives me the ability to define the radius of that bolt head, and it's going to be half of the diameter, or half of 1 3/16, which is 0.59375, and there is the bolt head. So now I'm going to move the bolt head so it's centered onto the actual threaded portion of the bolt. I use the mid from 2 points. I'm going to also place it in the middle between the actual threaded portion. Now I can take the information I already have there and copy it. I'm going to copy this line from this endpoint to that one to this one. I've shown all of this in red on the actual PDF file, but we can do it this way. And the head itself is a 1/2 inch thick, so I'll offset it by 0.5. And this line offset now gives me all the line work I need. I'll click on trim because I want to trim to these lines, all the information, and I'm just clicking on them or using crossing. I don't need that line nor that line. And now I can get rid of all these. And there's the bolt head. Now the portion that will be seen in this section is the bracket and the head, but everything else is going to be hidden. So I'll select those lines that are going to be hidden, and I'll move to my properties menu and select hidden for a line type, and then I'll move this in position. Now before I do so, I may have some difficulty grabbing and copying that because some of the line work overlaps. So the easiest way to get around that is selecting everything. I just put a window around everything, and I'm going to create a group out of it. That makes it easier to grab and move. Now when I move this object, all I do is click on part of it, and all of it gets selected. Great. Now I also want to move that to the top where it's going to be positioned at the top of the fence. So I'll select copy and click on that. And I'm going to place it just haphazardly for now until I create a construction grid. So I know that that bracket is 2.5 inches out. I need an intersecting line here so that I can place it properly. So I'll select offset. And in the diagram I show drawing a couple lines. I can actually offset the fence that's right there. So 2.5. And you'll notice that's a rectangle, so it's offsetting in that manner. I'm going to delete it so I don't care what it really looks like. And then move this grouped object, you can see the advantage of grouping it, from that point to that point, and I've now placed it correctly on the diagram. Great, so let's see how it looks in L2, and there are my two brackets. Now I'm ready to finish off all my notations. My notations, you may have remembered, we copied and pasted them onto the side of the page so that we can use them at a later time. The first thing I'm going to do is switch to my notes layer where I keep all that information, and I will copy the detail reference first. I'm selecting everything except for the box. I'm going to make new ones for our application here, and I want to make sure that I copy the text information more or less where I want to see it on the drawing. Now the one to this side, we're going to be using one of the existing ones and flipping it over so it's in the right direction. Now I'm going to zoom in on the actual bracket so that we can draw our reference box around it. I'm going to switch back to the rectangle tool, and I will draw a rectangle. Now notice how it's snapping to different positions. I don't want it to snap to anything. I want to make sure that I pick a location that's in space. And then I will select the box and change its properties. I'll click on the box. I'll go into the property menu, change the color chip to number 8, and then the line type to hidden. That's what I want to see. And then I will rotate the arrowhead and the line, the leader line that refers to it. So I select them both, press enter, click on the base of the arrow, so then I can maneuver it into position. There we have it. And then I can move all of this information, including the arrowhead, from the end point of the arrowhead to the edge of the box, and that one's complete. Okay, let's move on to the other one. This one refers to the finial that's right here. So you'll notice that the text is a bit close. So I'm going to move that in the arrowhead just a bit away from the finial I want to reference. I want to draw a box around the finial. Change that to a number 8 with hidden lines. Now you notice that the hidden lines are in two directions but not in the other two. That's because this line is too short. And that's what happens with line types. If I stretch this box out a bit, I'll press F8 to make sure it's a nice square box. I have to make sure that this distance is far enough that'll give me that gap. Now I'll move the arrowhead and the line work from the end of the arrow, and I'm picking nearest, so it selects the box. You'll notice this is a very short arrow. That's fine. And I will fillet that with a 0 radius fillet. Now refer to that detail. This refers to the other bracket. If I want to be consistent, I can copy the lower box that I put around the lower bracket. I'm picking the same point, the end point of the bracket, and now I'll zoom in and pick the end point of the bracket. Now those two boxes are the same. I will rotate the arrowhead and the line at the base. Now my F8 is on, that's why that arrow is snapping to different positions. I want to get it more or less correct. So I'll stretch the line out until I'm happy with its location. And then I'll move. Now, the last thing I selected was the arrowhead and the line. I'm going to type in P and enter, and notice it selects it again. That's part of my selection sets. P and enter stands for previous. So that was my previous selection, the arrowhead. Now I can select it again using P and enter. And then I'll do a 0 radius fillet at the top of this. And my last thing is this cap, and I will draw a rectangle around the cap. And this one I'm going to draw a fairly large box to represent the cap. Click on it, change its properties, number 8, hidden line, and I'm going to use one of these other detail references, and I will mirror the information, the line work, the arrowhead. I'm just picking that center of the cap because it's convenient, and I'll press F8, and that will give me a nice straight mirror line. Press enter. Notice it mirrored everything except for the actual text information. That's a default setting with the program. You can actually adjust that. In our case, it served well. And then I will move that item. Now notice I'm putting a window around the two twos. Why aren't they selected? That's because they're in model space and we're working in paper space, so it's not picking it. Or they're in the viewport, these are outside the viewport. So I'm going to move this reference detail below. That's a good spot. And then rotate the line. Because I filleted it and they were two polylines, it simply joined them to become one. I can, like we did before, explode that line so it becomes two separate units like that. And that will then separate them, and we're back to where we were before. Now I'm going to rotate this line and that arrowhead from this position, the base of it, rotate it around till it's going to point at the corner of the box. And then I'm going to move previous. Select the endpoint of the arrow, move it to the corner of the box, and then I'll fillet the two lines together, and there we have the third box. Now I simply have to change the actual lettering. So this is 1 on L3. This one is 2 on L3. And this detail is 2 on L2 on this drawing itself. The lower one is different from the top one. This one is 3 on L3. And so all my references are in place now. So let's bring in our titles. I'm going to copy where I've got 1L1, move it into position, and I'm panning in and out, zooming in and out. This is our pilaster sectional view. Now here's something that's interesting. The drawing itself is too low. If I double click inside the viewport and move the drawing, all the text information stays where it is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on the viewport layer, double click outside of it in case you're still inside that viewport, and then I'm going to move the viewport and all the text in the box and everything that I created here. And I'm just zooming in on it. I end my selection, click a base point, and I'm going to move that all up in the view. Now the text and the drawing move together as one. That's what we need to have done in this particular scenario. Now I can turn off my viewport layer, and now the drawing is correct and with ample room down below to finish off my notation. This is called the pilaster section detail. And you'll notice it's all capital. And the scale happens to be the same at a 1/2 inch, but the drawing number has changed. Don't forget, when you copy and paste all these reference bubbles, you have to make sure that you adjust them according to what the drawing is. So there's my first one. So you'll notice if I copy this over underneath the finial, that the line work of the window of the finial will interfere with the actual information that I'm pasting below. This box was drawn afterwards, so if I move it, it has no reference to the drawing underneath it. I must make sure that, once again, the viewport layer is left on, and I will stretch the viewport and the box at the same time to make sure that it's high enough to be able to fit the title bubble underneath it. Once again, I can stretch this and move its direction, which I don't want. I want to make sure I put F8 on so it's nicely stretched in a vertical manner without any sort of distortion. Now I can turn off my viewport, and I can copy my title reference from its existing location over. Just fits. And this is number 2 on L2, and it's the finial details. And I'll click off of that. Now this one bit of line work here, it's a bit short. I can click on it, click on the node, stretch it across. This one fits perfectly. There is my L2. It's complete.